Guys, just want to continue the series on idolatry. And this subject is idolatry that's crept into Christianity. In Christianity, we worship the one true invisible God, but idolatry has also crept into Christianity. So, as we were talking about before, one of the main sort of traits of idol worship is appeasement of a god. There's an element of appeasement to it, and it has a ritualistic, repetitive nature to it. So basically, if you don't appease, and if you don't continue to do this, a certain action, sacrifice of whatever, then there is consequences. So you need to keep doing these things to appease this god, this false god. So I'd like to talk about some idols in Christianity that can creep in, like idolatry that can kind of creep in unawares, so to speak. Remember just when I talked about previously about how the Israelites, they thought they were worshipping Yahweh. They thought God was happy if they would go to the high places and worship, when God wasn't asking them to do that. At that time, he was saying, you just worship me in Jerusalem, follow those yearly pilgrimages and etc. Just the various requirements that he had, just follow those. But no, they were taking it a step further and trying to worship God in high places, thinking that was going to make a difference. It had that repetitive, ritualistic nature to it. I think that often church, the way we do church today, can have these elements to it. How on a Sunday we're told that to be a faithful Christian, you ought to be turning up to church on a Sunday, every Sunday faithfully. Doing various jobs. Oh, that person's a faithful Christian, or even Christian disciplines like prayer, fasting, can actually themselves turn into a form of idol worship. In a sense, you're turning God into a transactional God, which is like a false God, where you think, okay, if I pray for so long, then God owes me this. Then I should be getting this. Or if I fast this much, then I should be getting that. So there's this transactional nature to it. It can become ritualistic. And I actually fell into this trap myself in times past. Thankfully, I got out of it. We can all fall into these traps. So like performance-based Christianity can become like an idol, and you notice the presence of God and the favor of God is not there anymore when you get into these habits. Those are some things. So I'm not saying that it's not good to commit to a church. Like if you feel that God has led you to a particular church location, institutional church, and he wants you to plant yourself there, then that has like a covenant nature to it. And if you know for sure that the Lord has brought you there, then you don't leave that place until you know that the Lord is taking you out of that place. And there's a degree, so it's a covenant thing. It's obedience to God, right? Obedience to the one true God. But it's there. Sometimes it's hard to know the difference. This is why we need to ask the Lord for wisdom. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What is the heart behind? What is the motive? What is the true heart motive behind why I do what I do at church, in my walk with God, in Christianity? To be transparent, to be honest with ourselves, to be honest with God, as to why we do what we do. So there's all kinds of things, idols, man-made rules that have crept into church, One of them is tithing. You're being obedient to God if you pay your 10%, when really there's no basis for that. As a New Testament believer, the tithing was part of the taxation system for Israel, because that was the priests. It was a form of government, and that was part of their taxation system. I don't want to go into great detail with that, but that definitely can become like an idol. Well, if I just pay my tithes, I'm keeping God happy, type thing. I've got that box ticked. So again, it has this ritualistic, repetitive nature without any real buy-in, without any real hard buy-in. That's what idolatry does. Transactional. I give you my tithes, then I get favor from God. A transactional thing. So yeah, church attendance, just performance-based Christianity, altogether. So yeah, so I just want to go into also another thing. Our gifts and callings can actually become idols as well. This can certainly, I've certainly seen this in Pentecostal charismatic style Christianity, which is really what I have been exposed to. I haven't been exposed to any traditional sort of denominational style Christianity, but you certainly see this, people, churches that believe in the spiritual gifts and have the spiritual gifts operating. You have leaders of churches, you have people who operate in the spiritual gifts, operating gifts, and these are what I have seen is that these gifts and callings can become an idol to the person who's actually operating in that. Like they find their sense of worth in those gifts, as long as those gifts are giving them the attention and the honor that they crave. That has now become an idol, right? The gift is there purely to just be a blessing to others, to the body of Christ, and it shouldn't be giving you. We shouldn't be leaning on those gifts to give us whatever we think we need, recognition or honor or whatever. So definitely that I've seen that as being a problem in the body of Christ. And people who are leaders in the body of Christ can become idols for the people. Like they're taught, you've got to honor your leader, etc., which is a good thing, but it's gone kind of too far where they just lean and hang on everything that the preacher says, without thinking for themselves, without praying for themselves, without really seeking the God for themselves, and basically elevating these preachers' words and this preacher's relationship with God above their relationship with God and their ability to hear from God, their ability to search for God, right? So in essence, the preacher has become like a middleman, like a go-between between Jesus and God. Now, that there is a sense of us having to do that for the world, like we're almost like mediators for the world, like we represent Jesus to the world, but once we're born again believers, we have the ability to relate to God directly. We don't need a mediator between us and Jesus, us and the Father. Technically, Jesus is our mediator between us and the Father, but we don't need another man to do that on behalf of us. But very slowly and subtly, this can actually be a very subtle thing that falls into place. So this also goes into the area of false doctrines, wrong doctrines, great emphasis on the man of God with the gift, who we all need to honor because he's the one with the gift and he's the one that has the close relationship with God, and we just need to do what he says and honor him. Otherwise, if we don't, then we come under some kind of divine judgment. So again, that is a form of idolatry. False doctrine goes with it. False believing goes with it. It's believing a God, like it's a transactional thing, as long as I just do whatever this person tells me to do, then God's happy, then I'll get blessed, so very, very interesting stuff. Again, this doesn't mean we shouldn't honor people who are, I guess, have been walking with God longer than us and who are higher in a level of maturity than us. That is really important. But there is a fine line here often that can happen, and I'm seeing a lot of it in the church. And this is why we're expected as believers to walk with God, talk with Him, lean upon Him, seek Him, question things, and work on that relationship with God. Like, takes work, takes like an effort, and just seeking Him, right? It takes loyalty and trust. So wrong doctrines can come from these idolatrous type of thinking. The man of God, in times past, just going from my experience, the whole idea of submission can be taken overboard. You just need to do whatever, submit to the leader, as in do whatever he says, no matter what. So again, we need to have a right heart attitude towards our leaders, etc. But a lot of these doctrines and a lot of these belief systems can lead people down a wrong track and lead people very, very disillusioned. So again, we always need to ask the Lord for wisdom and take responsibility for our own relationship with Him. This is what the Israelites failed to do when Moses was saying, you know what? When God was manifesting Himself on the mountain with thunder and lightning and everything, the Israelites did not want to approach God. They said, Moses, can you just do it on our behalf? So there's this thing in us that does not want to take responsibility for approaching God and getting close to Him and making ourselves accountable to Him. No, we'd rather find an easy way around that. The flesh doesn't want to do that. So, church movements can become an idol. We think if we're part of a certain movement that we're it, we're the latest and greatest thing, and generally these things fall down after a while. So, out of interest's sake, the very existence of the United States of America is because people in the UK, in the United Kingdom, who were sick of the religious system of the church, Anglicanism, and the Church of England, and being constricted with the way they should worship God, that they left there to seek God and worship Him freely. How Jesus was saying, worships me in spirit and in truth. So they left and they went to the States, and that is how the United States was born, by people seeking the Lord. So, and this is how all of the denominations were born. They broke away from the status quo, from the tried and true, and then created another move of God where God was operating. And then eventually that movement became stale. And then there was another breakaway. All the changes in the church were because of this, breaking away from the stale, old, religious, repetitive, ritualistic belief systems and man's rules, and then opening up to a new relationship with God. So, those are some of the things, the risks of idolatry that I see in Christianity now. With Frontier of Faith, we are a home church movement. We believe, now I don't believe that there's no place for the institutional church, because I do believe it's there, but I think for the most part, the Western world, as time goes by, as the decades roll by, it's going to become more and more of a home church scenario, the body of Christ, people relating to one another in their homes and on the streets. So, the fivefold ministry, etc., will just be moving amongst homes and on the streets. And this will be where the bulk of believers will be. This is how they will be discipled. This is how they will grow. I think there is so much more. As you know, in the year 326 or whatever it is, there was a series of things that took place. Constantine became a Christian and then basically made a decree that Christians were not to meet in homes, but were to take over the temples and meet in temples, and basically inherited the way that those false gods would worship their gods. So Christianity basically started to copy idolatry in temples. So I don't think there's a real You know, just because the church is bricks and mortar, I think that's okay, but I think there's a huge temptation for man mind to become ritualistic. I'm going to church, I'm going to spectate, I'm going to do this. If I tick these boxes, then I fulfilled my obligations to this God of mine. And that's the start and finish of their relationship with God. But no, when you work in homes and on the streets, you have to be who you are. There's no pretense. There's no Sunday happy face. People know you for who you are. You have to work in community. All your flaws and failures are exposed, and there's plenty of opportunity for discipleship and accountability in these sort of scenarios. So, but anyway, I've talked about that a lot, I think, in old videos. But yeah, that is how idolatry has really come into Christianity. So it's very subtle. But a relationship with God differs from an idolatrous relationship in the sense there's a covenant relationship with God. We have covenant relationships with God and with other believers. It is a long-term gig. It is not a short-term gig. It's not, long-term is not transactional. You know, time is a great tester of a person's intentions of their heart. You know, time. Blessings from God are inherited in time. They are not earned. You know, like a blessing is not earned. A blessing is inherited when you develop a relationship with God, and as that relationship grows, a blessing and a promise is inherited. It's inherited rather than, okay, you did a good thing, I give you a reward, like rewarding a dog for doing a trick. That's not how our God works. Not how Yahweh works. It's not how our Father in heaven works. So it's non-transactional. It is a non-transactional relationship. Our relationships with other believers should not be transactional in nature. It shouldn't be, well, if I do this for you, then I kind of expect that you should be doing this for me. And if you don't do it for me, then I get offended, you know. A good example of this is finances. Like, for example, you know, people have different levels of financial ability as they go through their walk with God. We had some friends in our life who used to take us out to dinner and pay for us often, you know, and we couldn't keep up with it because financially we just weren't able. But then there were other friends in our lives, and we were in a financially better position that we would do similar things, and we wouldn't expect them to keep up with us like this Indian giver relationship. No, it's just be a blessing, and the relation and God blesses us through other ways, through other means. It is not a transactional relationship. So covenant relationship versus transactional relationship. God is in a covenant. Idol worship is transactional, but that's crept into the church big time. Often we can see that with churches. So when someone leaves a institutional church for whatever reason, let's say they leave for some disagreement or something, or they've left or moved on, or something's happened, then so many stories I've heard where basically those previous the church that the person left, they cut them off, don't talk to them, don't even talk to them in the shopping centres and whatever. So it's because they're not really in that group anymore. So that's a good example of, you know, a relationship which has strings attached, which is an idolatrous type, transactional type relationship. So our relationship with God, the true God, the invisible God, requires faith. He's an invisible God. He's an invisible God. That's what makes it so different. And the flesh does not like not being able to touch, see, feel, control, manipulate. It takes faith. It's a spirit to spirit thing. It takes faith to have a good relationship with God. It requires faith and trust, long-term trust and faith. That's the difference. That's what so few are willing to really invest in. So those are basically just me just sharing my thoughts on that. Hopefully it helps somebody. God bless you. Take care. Bye.